Sarah Hanson-Young is a South Australian Greens Senator and also a number of portfolios she holds. We're going to talk about communications and environment today. Great to have you with us on FlowFM, Sarah.
Great to be here, Ricky. Thanks for having me.
Look, might change things up a bit what we're going to talk about, because when it comes to World Wilderness Day, which is today, it's probably a good place to start and talking about the Murray-Darling Basin plan.
Well, that's right, because we know that the environment is in a very critical state, and the River Murray and the Murray-Darling Basin is such a prime example of this. One of those issues where too much water over years and years has been taken out of the system, and we need to rebalance it so that we can ensure that the river is flowing in the dry times. I know we've had a lot of rain lately, and there's a lot of water in the river, but sooner than we think, it's going to start getting dry again, and we need to make sure that the river is healthy, that the native fish have a healthy place to live, and that we keep the river alive for all users. There's no jobs on a dead river, Ricky.
Absolutely. And look, we're trying to drill into this topic of buybacks because I know it instantly gets people's back up in some river communities, but it does appear, we were just speaking with the University of Adelaide's Dr. Constantine Seidel, agricultural economist, on this, and he was pointing out it's often what I'm calling fractional buyback or partial buyback that happens. Farmers don't actually leave communities, they just get more efficient at what they're doing.
Look, that's right, and no one's talking about compulsory acquisition or anything here. We're talking about voluntary buybacks. And I think thinking about it as a partial kind of reduction of people's licenses, selling off a bit and keeping a bit, becoming more efficient, and of course leaving more water in the river so that it's sustainable. I mean, that's the whole point of this. If we want to keep the river alive, we've got to make sure that it is in the best possible position for the drying climate.
And Dr. Constantine Seidel was also talking about, we discussed New South Wales's performance, the Murray-Darling Basin authorities giving them a big F basically in terms of getting their water sharing plans sorted out. What's your view on their performance?
Oh, it's so frustrating. We are 10 years down the track now on the Murray-Darling Basin plan, and the New South Wales government has really dragged the chain for the better half of the last decade, and really are holding up this process. And we're at a position now where at the lower end, we're still waiting for that extra 450 gigalitres that was promised to the lower reaches of the river to keep it alive. And in New South Wales is only just implementing their water sharing plans. And to be honest, they're pretty bogus.
And that triple bottom line test that exists at the bottom of when it comes to buybacks in that 450 gigalitres, Dr. Seidel was saying it's just not workable. If I can paraphrase what he's saying, what we have at the moment is now a no losers test rather than more winners than losers test. I mean, when was that test changed, and do you support it in its current format?
Yeah, that's a really good way of describing it. And you're right, it's because there's no losers, you can't do anything. And the problem here is we actually have to make adjustments. And money is should be spent buying water back. That goes into those communities. That helps farmers to become more efficient with their water, and the water is actually returned to the river. This triple bottom line argument was put in when Barnaby Joyce was the water minister, and let's be honest, he's never really cared about what happens down at the lower end. It was always about looking after the big corporate cotton farmers up north, and here we are. So we need to move away from that, get back to what the plan originally proposed, which was 450 gigalitres, to make sure here in South Australia and the lower reaches of the river would be looked after.
Now, I want to get to communications in a moment, but the New South Wales Nationals Minister for Agriculture, Dougal Saunders, this week has called for the release of the carp herpes virus to address the numbers of carp in the system. I thought Barnaby Joyce had a look at this and decided it wasn't the way to go.
Yeah, there was advice, internally that this wasn't the way to go. I've got concerns about it. I know a lot of people in South Australia have concerns about it, but I don't know. I feel like it gets headlines in the middle of an election, and we know New South Wales is in the middle of a state election. So I'm going to mark it up to that at this point.
All right, let's talk communications. I want to get to Australia Post first because there is this Senate inquiry going on at the moment regarding regional bank closures. And Anna Bligh told us that for the head of the Banking Association that Australia Post is going to play a greater role in providing bank services. That's probably one of the essential needs of why we need to keep Australia Post in the regions.
Absolutely. And any review of Australia Post must make sure that at its centre and at its core is the delivery of essential services, whether that's the mail that people rely on in order to get their information from government or their utility bills or loved ones. And of course, that ability to have a post office in town that does those variety of different services for people. As the big banks are, winding up their branches and taking these communities for granted, there is going to be a bigger and bigger role for local post offices. I think it's absolutely essential that the regions are not left out of this conversation. I'm going to be watching this review on Australian Post very, very closely. I'm worried about any suggestions that profits are the driver of this. This is an essential service. It's a taxpayer-funded service. It's there to deliver services to every Australian, whether you live in the suburbs, in the city or in the bush.
Is there an issue with just how Australia Post is being run? Because we had this controversy about watches being given to executives and how much the executives are paid. Is it run in much more of a corporatised way than, I guess, as an essential service as you describe it?
Yeah, it's this strange makeup and setup at the Australia Post, similar to the NBN Co. They're kind of quasi-public, quasi-private run government businesses. And so while they're government-funded, government-owned, and under the remit of the community, they're run as if they're private corporations, and that means big bonuses and big salaries for executives. And at the end of the day, this comes at the expense of actually investing in the organisation and the services they deliver. So one of the key things we should see out of a review is a cap on executive salaries and a cap on bonuses. And I just don't think it's okay in a taxpayer run company, a public service company, that we provide big bonuses to any executives. Now, I was questioning the NBN only a couple of weeks ago in Senate estimates, and the CEO of NBN gets a $700,000 bonus, which pushes his entire salary to $2.9 billion. I mean, it is obscene.
Sorry, billion, his salary.
Billion. Sorry. Sorry, Ricky. Million.
I thought things had got bad. I didn't know they got that bad, Sarah Hanson-Young.
Million. Isn't that extraordinary? Nearly $3 million to do your job. I just don't think anyone is worth that much.
Well, it's to help him with the cost of living crisis, I suspect.
That's right.
Sarah, speaking of the, I guess, corporate sector, when it comes to the Murdoch media, I know the Greens have had long-running concerns about the News Limited and I guess the approach it takes. Why are you calling for, is it a royal commission? What are you looking for?
Well, we know that media diversity in this country is really under pressure, and it's one of the reasons why I like speaking to on shows like yours and engaging with local media, because we know that that's where the real news from local communities is gathered. It's where it's shared. It's where it's told. So I've got a real concern of the almost monopoly-like dominance that the Murdoch-owned media has in Australia. They are the largest market holder, and we've got the most concentrated in the world. But in addition to that, we're seeing what's unfolding in the US right now, where Fox News are currently in a legal dispute around the promotion of the lies and myths that came out after Trump lost the election. Remember those riots on the Capitol, the promotion of the myth that the election was stolen. We're now seeing lots of evidence coming out that even Rupert Murdoch has admitted that his presenters on Fox News knew the claims were wrong and yet still promoted it. I think there's a big question mark over the influence that big media has on our politics and on our local news.
And is there a trend, I know you've got to go, but do we have a trend maybe during the past coalition government, now there's a Labor government, where we've got a more corporatised view of business in general, be it media, be it otherwise, and it's getting harder and harder for small business and I guess smaller outlets to get their business done?
Look, I do think there is a slide away from the local and the small business, whether it's with a community focus or just that kind of those businesses and those community groups that feed back into the local community, offering whether it's the news or the services. And I think we've got to get back to thinking about how we invest in our local communities, how we invest in the skills in our local communities. There isn't a one-size-fits-all, Ricky, and I really worry that whether it's the syndication of our news, so many of the local papers, for example, across the country have been gobbled up by two of the big media players, News Corp, which is owned by Murdoch, and the Nine papers. And the news they're getting is coming out of Melbourne and Sydney. It's not coming out of their local towns.
Oh, you're singing from our song sheet. We're trying to do something about that here at FlowFM. Sarah Hanson-Young, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Ricky.